Greg mentioned, we're kind of on this, this tighter time schedule, and so I really think I'm going to focus this down into three different things I want to discuss this morning about weed control and dry beans. And here's a list. And so Greg kind of set me up for sharing some of his data on using ride for weed suppression and dry bean. I'm going to have a short update on some research on water hemp and Palmer amaranth control in dry beans. And then a fun little trial that we conducted this last summer, I want to talk about it at the end. And that's what is the effect of rolling on weeds and our herbicide efficacy. So that'll be about 5 minutes at the end here. So first thing I want to just do is I always do like to, and Greg plugged this as well, the dry bean survey. And one of the things I like to look at is I basically look for anything weed mentioned in there. And so this is a table about, for those who use cover crops, why are they using cover crops? This is the 2018 version of the survey. And back then in North Dakota, we had one respondent that said he used cover crops for weed control. The most recent edition that we have published, the 2021 survey, that did get us up to 10, which represented about 40% of the respondents to this question on the survey, indicating they use cover crops for weed control. And so that's something that I like to track of if we're using these cover crops, what's the intended use. And if we're getting 40% or so saying they're using them for weed control, then we certainly need to take a closer look at that and provide as much information as we can. And so I'm going to share 2 years of data on weed control that Greg conducted at Carrington. So this is the 2020 results. And Greg had mentioned there's about 6 different treatments, our conventional check of tillage, and then a pre-emergence herbicide, and then different termination dates, in this case, 36 days before planting, without and with a pre-herbicide, 20 days before planting, 1 day after, and 11 days after planting. The bars here, gold is foxtail, green is common lamb's quarters. And what I want to point out is basically the best treatments strictly for weed control were the conventional tillage with the pre-check, that early termination with that pre-emergence herbicide at planting, and then when we planted green, essentially, so terminated that rye after planting the dry beans. And so 4 different things that basically gave us some the best weed control in this trial. And I do know that Greg has mentioned in the past, this planting green or termination after planting, there can be some issues with moisture management and some yield loss at the end of the year. And so from my perspective, if you want to avoid that yield loss, look at these first 2 that I mentioned, that conventional check. But if you want to use that rye, have good weed control and then avoid that yield loss because of rye competition, this early termination following with a pre at planting it is a pretty good method. 2021, very similar results, just overall less weed control, very challenging in that drought year. And so we've just flipped the axes here. And so our conventional check is all the way here on the left. And then all the way here on the right is kind of the planting green treatments. And again, similar, but now instead of 95 to 99% weed control, it's kind of the mid to upper 70s to 80% for foxtail and then pigweed. So chart there on the right says gray, but the red bar would be the pigweed here. And so again, overall, those best treatments were still the conventional check, early termination followed by a pre at planting, and then these planting green treatments. Another thing that Greg and the crew at Carrington did was just summarize weed control over all their years on the different species that they evaluated it on. So the species are here on the left. The average control over all the trials is this box here. And the range of control that they experience is the box next to it. So for instance, if we're looking at foxtail species, on average, using rye, they got 68% control of foxtail. That, however, ranged from 0 to 99% over the course of all these trials, and foxtail was rated in 9 different research trials. So most data on foxtail, quite a range. If we average about 68%, we'd call that poor to fair, approaching good if we were rating this as a herbicide in the weed control guide. And if you go down the chart, well, basically the rest of them are that poor to fair, maybe good range. And so definitely a benefit that we can get from weed control, but showing that the rye itself will not give us complete weed control. We still do need to incorporate herbicides into our program to get that weed control we're looking for. So that was the cover crop piece. Now on shift gears, talk about a little bit of updated research on water hemp and Palmer amaranth. But first, I just want to show our distribution of water hemp across the state. Any green county is where we have confirmed the presence of at least one water hemp population. Where this becomes important for me for dry beans is that water hemp we can assume is group 2 herbicide or ALS inhibitor herbicides resistant. So for dry beans, that's Pursuit and Raptor. So where we have water hemp, don't count on those products working. Another pigweed that we really need to talk more about going in the future is Powell amaranth. So not Palmer, but Powell, that we've had in the state for several decades at least. Bit more problematic than redroot pigweed, not quite as problematic as water hemp. So in a recent survey where we looked at resistance, and this was basically plants that were sent to us and we screened for resistance. And so the 5 red counties are where we did confirm group 2 resistant Powell amaranth. I'd be willing to bet we could fill in the rest of these counties in between, but these are just where we got samples of Powell amaranth for this survey and confirmed resistance to Raptor and Pursuit. So a summary of basically what herbicides work or we can plan on working for water hemp control or that ALS resistant Powell amaranth control is really summarized on this slide. And this is a bit of a generic slide, but just showing that we really can rely a lot on our products like Spartan, our group 15 herbicides like Dual and Outlook, or than anything yellow. And post-emergence, when Raptor doesn't work, Bazagran has never been a good pigweed herbicide, we really rely on Reflex. And then if we can, add some more residual herbicide. So I want to show a study that really took a look at how can we tease out differences on this top line, the residuals that we can use after or before planting. So I'm going to show some research on water hemp and then Palmer amaranth. Have one slide on Palmer data. Conducted this in 2 years, 2021 and 22. Fargo was our water hemp site, and then to provide some level of anonymity, we've dubbed our Palmer site Palmerville. So we used a pinto bean. Basically, how we conducted this trial is we incorporated different herbicides to a depth of 4 inches. Then we planted, and then we came back with our pre-emergence herbicides the same day. So I should say the entire trial was incorporated, whether there was a herbicide or not on that plot, and then planted, and then we put the pre-emergence herbicides on the plot. I just grayed out at the bottom. I won't have time to discuss the post-emergence trial, but the main takeaway from post on water hemp or Palmer is you need Reflex or Formesifin. Okay, so the treatments for this trial. So these are our pre-plant incorporated treatments. And just going down the list, we used single active ingredients of FTAM, Sonlan, Treflan, and Prowl. And then we got into some tank mixes and premixes. So FTAM, Sonlan, FTAM, and Treflan. And then some of our premixes of Spartan Charge, Spartan Elite. And then we tried a Spartan Charge plus Prowl premix. And then the rates there are on the right. Our pre-emergence products, we looked at our group 15s, so dual, 2 different rates of outlook. And then our premixes that we can apply pre-emergence of Spartan Charge, Spartan Elite. Then we can't apply yellow herbicides pre-emergence. And so we wanted to look at Spartan Charge plus Outlook. If we could apply pre-emergence, we would have done Prowl H2O there for a comparison to the incorporated treatments. So I want to go straight into results. So this slide is our water hemp control 4 weeks after planting. So 0 to 100% water hemp control. From left to right are the exact products I laid out in the last 2 tables. The gold line in the middle represents the separation of the pre-plant incorporated on the left, pre-emergence herbicides on the right. So overall, 4 weeks after planting, basically the worst treatment was 89% control summarized over 2 years. but a range from 89 to 99% control. So overall, very good control out of these products, a slight benefit to the pre-plant incorporated treatments. To look at some treatment separations, though, we took this out to 8 weeks after planting. So same exact layout as the last slide, except for now the data we're looking at are 8 weeks after planting, the residual control on water hemp. The letters represent statistical differences. So anything with an A next to it is similar. If there is no A, for instance, Prowl here would be different than the products with just that A next to it. So FTM, Treflan. And so the quick way to look at this slide is if you look at the ones with all the A next to it, those are the products that had the best residual control 8 weeks after planting. And so FTM, Treflan, Spartan Elite, FTM, Sonlan, and then our standalones of FTM, Sonlan, and Treflan all gave us similar control, 88 to 98% control. Then we started losing some control with some of the other treatments. And then the pre-emergence treatments really dropped off between 4 and 8 weeks after planting, generally ranging from 50 to 78% control, depending on the product. So overall, over 2 years of this trial, we did get better control with the pre-plant incorporated herbicides compared to the pre-emergence herbicides. And really with FTM and yellow herbicides and combinations thereof, plus Spartan Elite, proven to be the best products in this trial. And I just wanted to show one data. So this is our Palmer site. We're now looking at 4 weeks after planting. So we don't deal with many, if any, Palmer amaranth and dry bean acres yet. But if and when it arrives on some of our dry bean acres, I think I just want to show this slide to show the additional challenge Palmer can provide compared to water hemp for us as it pertains to weed control and dry bean. And so again, if you remember the water hemp control 4 weeks after planting, everything was generally 89 to 99% control. 4 weeks after planting for Palmer, now our best treatment was FTM Sonlan. And then some of the others that stood out at that timing were the FTM Treflan, Spartan Elite, and then FTM and Sonlan by themselves. One thing I'll point out that's a little bit different with Palmer compared to water hemp, there's some inherent tolerance and some resistance out there to some of our group 3 herbicides. Traditionally, with Palmer, they talk about Treflan because that was used in the cotton market, but have some similar issues with performance of Prowl on Palmer Amaranth. Interestingly, Sonlan did give us better control, so those could probably teased out a little bit differently into the future, but really we'll wait until Palmer is more of an issue to really tease out things like that. Okay, one thing I wanted to mention before wrapping up this pigweed discussion. So this is a slide I've showed for a number of years, looking at group 14 resistant water hemp. So resistance to things like famecifin or reflex. So this is just a bunch of different counties in the Midwest that had confirmed resistance to group 14 resistant water hemp. Well, this past year, we did confirm resistance, group 14 resistant water hemp in 7 counties in North Dakota. So highlighted in yellow, and a couple of those are some pretty important dry bean counties. So where this becomes important is for a number of reasons. So one, when we talk about group 14 resistant water hemp, that means that it's true resistance to our post-emergence products. So knowing we have ALS or group 2 resistance, knowing Bazagran doesn't work all that well, that really leaves us with nothing effective post-emergence in dry beans on that type of population. The other important point of consideration, when we talk about group 14 resistance in water hemp, true resistance to the post products, but reduced sensitivity to our pre-emergence products like Spartan. So in some of our treatments, if we got 80 to 90% control, residual control 4 weeks after planting, that may start breaking 2 weeks after planting on a group 14 resistant water hemp population. So none of those populations that we're aware of were found on a dry bean field, but just aware that they're in the area. If you start seeing some reduced sensitivity and water hemp to some of these group 14 products, there is a good chance you do have resistance. So knowing that makes weed control and dry bean is more challenging once you get group 14 resistant water hemp. Just wanted to highlight another table in the dry bean survey about crop rotation. And from a weed control perspective, that's where we would really want to focus on wheat, corn, or even a traded soybean that we could use in rotation to try and clean up some water hemp or other pigweed populations if we have these challenges in dry bean. Okay, last couple of minutes here, I want to focus on this trial we conducted this past year at Prosper. So we want to look at, does rolling influence weed control? And so this was actually a soybean trial, but these treatments are very applicable to dry beans, and we will be conducting this specifically on dry beans next year. We had 5 different treatments. A treatment where all we did was, this was conventional tillage. So we tilled, then we planted, and did nothing else. Did not roll, did not apply a herbicide. We had another check where we did roll after planting and did not apply a herbicide. And then we had 3 treatments where we applied a herbicide. The first one was a herbicide, and the herbicide that we used was Broadax. Same thing as Spartan Elite at 25 ounces. And so Broadax or Spartan Elite, without rolling, we applied the pre-emergence herbicide after we rolled. And then we had treatments where we applied the herbicide before rolling. And so really seeing the sequence of rolling and herbicide application, does that have an effect on weed control? And we took some visible weed control and then some weed counts. And so the first slide I want to see here, I apologize, this is weed control, not water hemp control. We looked at yellow foxtail, and then we had pal amaranth at this research site. This is control 4 weeks after planting. So where we did not apply a herbicide, we did not have control. So this one, we're really focused on the 3 treatments in the middle, where we had Broadax without rolling, where we rolled before applying the pre, and then where we rolled after applying the pre. And we did not see any differences on sequence of rolling and herbicide application. So generally 81 to 90% yellow foxtail control and near complete control of pal amaranth with this treatment. And that's to be expected with that herbicide, a pretty good herbicide on both of those weeds. Now, where we did see a difference was in weed density. And so now we've lumped this. The gold bars are now grasses. The green bars are broadleaf weeds. And so we just lumped them together as a grass or a broadleaf. Now we have plants per square meter represented on our y-axis, and the treatments at the bottom are the same. So in general, where we had that herbicide application, generally 10 to 20 weeds per square meter, pretty reflective of the visible weed control. We would need a post-emergence herbicide at this timing. Where all we did was conventionally till and plant, so no rolling, no herbicide, 50 to 100 broadleafs and grasses per square meter. However, we rolled, we greatly increased the amount of weeds per square meter. So that rolling pass really did provide a more conducive seed bed for the weeds, and we saw that reflected in the data that we collected. Showing this in picture form. So on the right is that no roll, no herbicide. So just plant and then do nothing else. And on the right here is where we rolled without the herbicide. And should show up pretty well here, but a lot of these bare areas that we have on the left tend to be a little bit gone or missing here on the right, just reflecting that higher weed density. Another way to look at it, we got somewhat fortunate that we had 2 treatments line up back to back. And so in the back here is where we rolled and did not apply that herbicide. In the front is where we did not roll and had no herbicide. And this really shows the difference of particularly our middle inter row here, a lot more weed density up front here or up the top where we rolled. So with that, a couple of different resources where you can find more information. Got a podcast I'm part of with a few different universities, War Against Weeds. And there's my contact info.